Most people think protecting their kidneys is simple. Cut back on salt, drink more water, maybe watch sugar a little. That sounds reasonable, but it misses a much bigger problem. The real pressure on your kidneys doesn't come from one obvious source. It builds from small choices repeated every day. Foods that seem completely normal can quietly add to that load over time, especially when they become part of your routine. As this builds, it starts to affect how efficiently your kidneys filter waste. Blood pressure can shift. Certain compounds become harder to clear. And the most concerning part is how subtle this process is. There's no clear moment where something feels wrong. That's why this matters more than most people realize. By the time many start paying attention, their kidneys have already been under strain for years. In this video, we'll walk through 10 common foods that quietly add pressure to your kidneys. More importantly, you'll learn a few simple changes you can make right away to reduce that strain, without having to completely change the way you eat. We'll begin with the ones that seem harmless, then move toward the ones with the strongest long-term impact. Number 10. High-sodium foods. At first glance, this one feels straightforward. Most people already connect sodium with blood pressure, but what matters more is not just the amount, it's the source and what's missing around it. When sodium comes from packaged foods like canned soups, frozen meals, or fast food, it usually arrives without the natural balance your body expects. There's little potassium to offset it, and that shifts how your system responds. Instead of regulating fluid properly, it begins holding on to excess sodium, drawing more water into circulation. As this builds, pressure inside your blood vessels starts to rise. Your kidneys are then pushed to filter under that pressure, over and over again. Those tiny filtering units begin to take on more strain than they were meant to handle consistently, and this is where it becomes more serious. That ongoing pressure can start affecting the small, delicate vessels inside the kidneys. You won't feel it happening, but it directly impacts how efficiently waste is cleared from your body. Here's the part many people overlook. Sodium itself isn't the enemy. Your body actually depends on it. The issue comes from heavily processed foods, where sodium is concentrated while the supporting minerals have been stripped away. A more balanced approach is simple. Reduce how often you rely on packaged meals and bring more whole foods into your routine. Fresh vegetables, leafy greens, and home-prepared dishes naturally provide the potassium your body needs to handle sodium more effectively. When that balance is restored, the workload on your kidneys becomes more manageable. But when it's missing day after day, the strain keeps building in the background. Number 9. Coffee creamer. That scoop you stir into your coffee each morning might feel like a small habit. It softens the taste, makes it more enjoyable. But most creamers today have very little in common with real dairy. They're made from processed blends, emulsifiers, flavoring agents, and stabilizers designed to create texture and shelf life. And once these compounds enter your body, they don't simply pass through without effect. Here's where it starts to matter. Some of these ingredients can interfere with the thin filtering layer inside your kidneys. That layer is responsible for keeping important proteins in your bloodstream while allowing waste to be removed. When that balance begins to shift, even slightly, small amounts of protein can start leaking into your urine. It's subtle at first, but as this continues, your kidneys are forced to operate under less stable conditions, and over time, that creates a cycle. The filtering system becomes less efficient, which adds more strain. More strain makes it harder to maintain proper separation, and the longer this goes on, the more vulnerable that system becomes. What makes this easy to miss is how routine it feels. That same cup of coffee every morning, one scoop, then another, without much thought. A more practical approach is to cut back on how often you use these products. If you enjoy creaminess, switch to real milk or a simple, minimally processed alternative. Even using less rather than eliminating it completely can reduce the load your kidneys have to manage. Because when something is repeated daily, even a small effect can gradually build into a larger burden. Number 8. Alcohol. For many people, this feels like a normal part of daily life. A glass in the evening, something to relax the mind. It doesn't usually trigger concern the way other habits might, especially when the amount seems small. But once alcohol enters your system, one of the first things it does is shift your body's fluid balance. It acts as a diuretic, meaning it encourages your body to lose more water than usual. And your kidneys rely heavily on that fluid to filter waste efficiently. With less water available, everything becomes more concentrated. The blood your kidneys are filtering carries a higher load in a smaller volume. That forces the filtering system to work under tighter, less stable conditions. There's another layer that often goes unnoticed. Alcohol can increase the production of uric acid, a compound that tends to form sharp crystal-like particles. These particles don't dissolve easily. Instead, they can accumulate and irritate tissues over time, especially within the urinary system. Now, combine those two effects: reduced fluid to flush things out, and an increase in compounds that are harder to process. Your kidneys are not only working with less support, but also dealing with material that puts more strain on the system. This doesn't usually create immediate symptoms. That's why it's easy to overlook. But when this pattern repeats, day after day, the workload begins to shift in a way your body has to constantly adapt to. A more controlled approach makes a difference here. Keeping alcohol occasional rather than routine allows your system time to reset. Pairing it with adequate water intake helps maintain the fluid balance your kidneys depend on. And avoiding high-sugar mixed drinks can prevent adding another layer of metabolic stress on top. Over time, it's not the single drink that matters most. It's how often your body is placed in that same dehydrated high-load state. Number 7. Green smoothies. This is one that often surprises people. It's usually seen as a clean, healthy choice. Spinach, almonds, beets, blended into something that feels like it should support your body. But the concern here comes from what's inside those ingredients. Many of them are naturally high in oxalates, compounds that can form tiny crystal-like particles under certain conditions. Once oxalates enter your system, your body has to process and remove them. If that process isn't efficient, they can move through the bloodstream and reach the kidneys, where they are filtered out. As the amount builds, these compounds can bind with minerals, like calcium, and begin forming crystals. Over time, that can contribute to kidney stones and create irritation within the filtering system. What makes this tricky is that the same smoothie, repeated every day, keeps adding to that load, especially when it's built around the same high oxalate ingredients. A better way to approach this is to change what goes into the blender. Instead of relying on spinach or beet greens every day, rotate in lower oxalate options like kale, bok choy, or romaine lettuce. Swap almonds for chia seeds or pumpkin seeds. If you still use higher oxalate foods, keep the portion smaller and don't use them daily. Pairing your smoothie with a calcium source like yogurt or a small amount of milk can also help bind oxalates in the gut so they're less likely to be absorbed. And staying well hydrated supports your body's ability to clear what does get through. The idea of a smoothie isn't the issue. It's the repetition of the same ingredients day after day that gradually shifts the balance. Number 6. Artificial sweeteners. These are often marketed as the safer option. No sugar, fewer calories. A simple swap that seems like it should reduce risk, and for many people, that makes them an easy habit to rely on every day. But once inside the body, these compounds don't behave as neutrally as they appear. Common sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, and acesulfame potassium are processed differently than natural sugars. Some can break down into byproducts that place stress on cellular systems. Others can interfere with how the kidneys handle filtration and reabsorption. As this continues, the effect isn't always immediate, but over time, these substances can begin to alter how efficiently your kidneys do their job. The filtering units may not respond as precisely, and that can shift how waste and essential compounds are managed. There's also the issue of accumulation. Certain artificial sweeteners can build up in kidney tissue, contributing to oxidative stress. That kind of stress affects how cells produce energy and maintain stability, which adds another layer of strain over time. What makes this easy to overlook is how widely these sweeteners are used. They're not just in diet drinks. They appear in flavored yogurts, protein bars, sugar-free snacks, even products labeled as health conscious. A more practical approach is to reduce how often these are part of your daily routine. Instead of relying on artificial sweeteners, consider gradually adjusting your taste preference. Plain water, unsweetened tea, or coffee without additives are simple options that remove that extra load entirely. If you still prefer a bit of sweetness, small amounts of natural alternatives like fresh fruit or a light touch of honey can be used occasionally rather than making highly processed sweeteners a daily habit. Over time, it's not just about replacing sugar. It's about avoiding a cycle where the body is constantly adapting to substances it wasn't designed to process regularly. Number 5. Processed meat. This is one that often gets misunderstood. The concern isn't simply protein. Your body needs protein to maintain and repair tissue. The issue comes from how certain meats are processed before they reach your plate. Foods like sausages, bacon, deli slices, and cured meats are typically treated with preservatives such as nitrates, nitrites, and added phosphates. These compounds extend shelf life and enhance flavor, but they also change how your body has to handle them. Once inside your system, these additives can increase the acid load your kidneys need to manage. At the same time, they introduce compounds that can contribute to inflammation and oxidative stress. That combination makes the filtering process more demanding than it needs to be. Over time, this can begin to affect how efficiently your kidneys operate. The filtering units are exposed to a higher concentration of byproducts, and that can lead to gradual wear on the system. Not something you notice right away, but something that builds with repeated intake. There's another factor that adds to the strain. Processed meats are often high in sodium and inorganic phosphates, both of which are absorbed more easily than their natural forms. That increases the overall load your kidneys have to process with each serving. A more practical way to approach this is to shift toward less processed protein sources. Fresh cuts of chicken, fish, turkey, or lean beef give your body what it needs without the added chemical burden. If you do include processed meats, keeping them occasional rather than daily helps reduce long-term strain. Simple swaps can make a difference. A grilled chicken sandwich instead of deli meat. Freshly cooked meals instead of packaged options. Small adjustments like these lower the workload your kidneys have to carry over time. The goal isn't to remove protein, it's to choose forms that your body can handle more efficiently. Number 4. Phosphate-rich foods. Phosphorus is something your body actually needs. It plays a role in building bones and supporting energy production, so at first, this doesn't sound like a problem. The issue comes from the form it takes in many modern foods. In processed products like packaged meals, fast food, sodas, and processed cheese, phosphorus is often added as inorganic phosphate, and your body absorbs this form much more aggressively than what's found naturally in whole foods. Once absorbed, these excess phosphates don't just stay in the bloodstream. Your kidneys have to remove them to keep levels in balance. And when that intake becomes frequent, the filtering system is forced to handle more than it was designed for on a regular basis. As this continues, phosphate can begin to accumulate in places it shouldn't. Instead of supporting bone structure, it can start depositing in soft tissues, including the kidneys and blood vessels. Over time, this contributes to hardening and reduced flexibility in areas that need to stay soft and functional. There is also an imbalance that develops with calcium. When phosphate levels rise too high, it can disrupt that relationship, pulling calcium out of where it's needed and increasing the risk of abnormal deposits elsewhere. This isn't something that shows up overnight. It builds gradually, especially when processed foods become a regular part of daily meals. A more effective approach is to limit foods with added phosphates rather than avoiding phosphorus entirely. Fresh, whole foods like vegetables, legumes, and unprocessed meats contain natural forms that your body regulates more carefully. Reducing intake of processed cheese, packaged meals, and cola-style drinks can significantly lower the excess load. Checking ingredient labels can also help. Terms that include phosphate or phosphoric are a signal that the added form is present. Cutting back on those sources gives your kidneys a more manageable workload over time. Balance matters here. It's not about removing phosphorus, but about avoiding the forms that overwhelm your system when consumed too often. Number 3. NSAIDs. These are the common pain relievers many people keep within reach. Ibuprofen, naproxen, and similar medications are often used for headaches, joint pain, or everyday discomfort. Because they're available over the counter, they tend to feel safe and familiar, but the way these drugs work inside the body creates a different kind of pressure on your kidneys. NSAIDs reduce inflammation by blocking certain chemical signals. The problem is, those same signals also help regulate blood flow to the kidneys. When that signal is reduced, less blood reaches the filtering system, and your kidneys rely on a steady, strong blood supply to do their job properly. With reduced flow, they're forced to filter under less favorable conditions. At the same time, the workload doesn't change. Waste still needs to be cleared. Toxins still need to be processed. So now the kidneys are doing the same job, but with less support. As this pattern repeats, it can begin to affect how well the filtering units function. The tissue becomes more vulnerable to stress, and over time, that can lead to a gradual loss in filtering capacity. This is especially important for people who use these medications frequently. Occasional use is generally manageable for most individuals, but when it becomes a regular habit day after day, the strain adds up in a way that's easy to overlook. A more careful approach is to reserve these medications for when they're truly needed, rather than using them routinely. Exploring other ways to manage discomfort, such as gentle movement, stretching, or physician-guided alternatives, can reduce reliance on them. If you do use NSAIDs, keeping the dose as low as effective and avoiding long-term continuous use helps limit the impact on your kidneys. The goal isn't to avoid relief, it's to avoid placing your kidneys under repeated stress without realizing it. Number 2, seed oils. Walk into almost any kitchen, and you'll likely find one of these sitting on the shelf. Used for frying, cooking, or mixed into packaged foods, they've quietly become part of everyday meals without much attention. The concern starts with how these oils are made and what happens when they're heated. During processing, they're exposed to high temperatures and chemical extraction, which makes the fats more unstable from the beginning. When you cook with them, especially at higher heat, that instability increases. As these oils break down, they form compounds known as aldehydes. These are highly reactive substances that your body doesn't handle easily. Once absorbed, they can begin to damage cells, particularly in areas with delicate structures. Your kidneys are one of those areas. Inside them, tiny filtering units rely on thin membranes to separate waste from essential nutrients. Repeated exposure to these compounds can weaken that structure, making the filtering process less efficient over time. There's another layer to this. Oxidized fats can also trigger inflammation and oxidative stress, both of which add pressure to kidney tissue when they occur regularly. Not all at once, but gradually, especially when these oils are used day after day. This isn't coming from a single meal. It builds through repetition. The same oil used for cooking. The same ingredients showing up in processed foods, sauces, and ready-made meals. A simple way to reduce this exposure is to change what you use in your kitchen. For everyday cooking, extra virgin olive oil or avocado oil are more stable and less likely to break down at moderate heat. If you're cooking at higher temperatures, try to limit deep frying and avoid reheating the same oil multiple times. Methods like baking, steaming, or light sautéing put put far less stress on the fats you use. It also helps to cut back on packaged foods, where these oils are often used repeatedly and combined with other additives. Small adjustments like these can lower how much of these compounds your body has to deal with on a daily basis. Number 1. Sugar. This is the one that shows up everywhere. Not just in desserts, but in drinks, sauces, packaged foods, and even products labeled as healthy. And most of the concern doesn't come from glucose alone, but from a specific part of sugar called fructose. Unlike other forms of energy your body can use right away, fructose is handled almost entirely by the liver, and processing it requires a large amount of cellular energy. As that process happens, your body begins to break down ATP, the molecule that stores and delivers energy inside your cells. That breakdown leads to the production of uric acid, and this is where things begin to affect your kidneys more directly. Uric acid is not just a waste product. In higher amounts, it can form sharp, crystal-like particles that are difficult to dissolve. These particles can irritate tissues, contribute to kidney stone formation, and increase stress on the filtering system. As levels rise, your kidneys are forced to work harder to clear it out. At the same time, elevated uric acid is also linked to increased blood pressure, which adds another layer of pressure on the kidneys from the inside. This creates a chain reaction. More fructose leads to more uric acid. More uric acid increases strain on the kidneys. And over time, that repeated stress can begin to affect how efficiently your kidneys function. What makes this especially difficult to manage is how often sugar appears in daily habits. Sweetened drinks, flavored coffee, snacks between meals. Even small amounts, repeated throughout the day, can add up quickly. A more effective approach is to reduce how often these sources are part of your routine, rather than trying to eliminate everything at once. Cutting back on sweetened beverages is one of the most impactful steps, since liquids are absorbed quickly and tend to deliver higher amounts. Replacing them with water, unsweetened tea, or coffee without added sugar can significantly lower your intake without making your routine feel restrictive. For foods, keeping sugar as an occasional addition rather than a daily habit helps limit how much fructose your body has to process. Whole fruits are generally a better option than processed sweets, since they come with fiber and are absorbed more gradually. Over time, it's not a single dessert that creates the problem. It's the repeated exposure, day after day, that gradually increases the load your kidneys have to manage. You've just seen how some of the most common foods can quietly add pressure to your kidneys over time. And the important thing to remember is this: it's not about being perfect, it's about becoming aware of the small habits that add up day after day. A few simple changes, repeated consistently, can make a real difference. Choosing better options, spacing things out, giving your body a little more support instead of more work. That's where progress happens. If you found this helpful, take a moment to support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps us continue sharing practical, easy-to-follow health content like this, and I'd like to hear from you. Which of these foods surprised you the most? Or which one do you find hardest to cut back on? Share it in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through the same thing. Thanks for watching, and take care of your health one step at a time.